Most people chasing high performance are solving the wrong problem. They're tracking sleep scores, optimizing their diet, stacking supplements, doing all the things and still feeling like they're running on empty by Thursday. So they add another tool, another protocol, another habit, and the emptiness stays. The problem isn't that these fixes don't work. The problem is that they're aimed at one system when there are actually three, and if you treat them as one, every fix you try stays incomplete. You patch one hole while the others keep draining. 2,000 years ago, Taoist practitioners mapped this out. They called it the three treasures, Jing, Qi, and Shen. Now, I know those words sound esoteric, so let me give you the plain language version right now. Jing is your body's reserve tank, the deep stored energy your whole capacity runs on. Qi is your daily energy in motion, the active force that flows through everything you do, moment to moment. Shen is the signal quality of your mind, your clarity, your perception, your ability to see situations accurately instead of through a fog of noise and reactivity. That's the framework, and by the end of this video, you'll have a clear mental model for why you feel depleted, why you feel scattered, why you feel emotionally reactive, even when nothing particularly bad is happening, and what to actually do about it. Not in abstract terms, in a sequence you can apply starting today. These aren't three separate topics to learn. They're three layers of one system, and they depend on each other in a specific order. Once you see the order, a lot of things that weren't working for you will start to make sense. So let's start at the foundation. Jing, your body's reserve tank. Jing is the hardest of the three to explain in modern terms because we don't really have a direct equivalent word for it, but the concept isn't complicated. Think of it as your total biological capacity, the deep reserve that everything else draws from. Part of it you're born with, inherited through your genetics, your constitution, what Taoists called pre-heaven Jing. The rest you build and maintain through food, sleep, rest and recovery. That's post-heaven Jing, the part you actually have some control over. It's not mystical. It's closer to what we'd now describe as your hormonal baseline, your adrenal reserves, your cellular repair capacity, the raw material your body uses to keep you functional under load. When Jing is full, you wake up feeling like yourself. When it's low, no amount of sleep feels like enough, and your body starts sending signals you keep ignoring because you've convinced yourself this is just what life feels like past 40. The Taoist observation about Jing that hits hardest is this: it burns slowly, but it doesn't refill easily. You can spend it faster than you can restore it, and high performers are almost purpose-built to drain it, because the traits that make someone effective, the drive, the tolerance for discomfort, the ability to push through exhaustion, those same traits bypass the warning signals that are supposed to protect Jing in the first place. Think about what chronic sleep restriction actually does over a long timeline. Not one bad night, not a rough week before a deadline, a decade of running on 5 hours because you're productive and you've got things to build, and sleep feels like a negotiable variable. The body absorbs it for a while, then somewhere in the mid-50s, a wall appears, not a gradual slowdown, a wall, energy that coffee can't touch, hormonal shifts that feel disproportionate to age, a recovery curve that's now measured in weeks instead of days. No biohack gets through it cleanly because the foundation has been spent. That's a Jing problem, and the reason it's so disorienting is that nothing external changed. The person is still technically doing the same things that worked before, but the tank that was silently subsidizing all of it is now running on fumes. This is also why Jing is the first treasure, not the second or third. It sits underneath everything. Your daily energy output depends on it. Your mental clarity depends on it. You can work on those upper layers, and you should, but if you ignore Jing, you're building on a foundation that's cracking. So the question Jing asks you to answer isn't, how do I get more done? It's, what am I not recovering from? That reframe matters because most people in the optimization space are permanently oriented toward addition. More output, more input, more refinement. Jing pulls you in the opposite direction. It asks what you need to stop doing, what debt you need to pay down, where you've been overriding the signals that were trying to protect you. Your sleep debt isn't just fatigue. Your chronic stress load isn't just uncomfortable. Overcommitment isn't just a scheduling problem. Each of those is a Jing drain, and they compound over years in ways that don't show up until the deficit is already serious. The tank is the foundation, and if the foundation is compromised, the rest of the system is compensating for it, whether you know it or not. Qi, your daily energy in motion. So Jing is the tank. Qi is what actually moves through the system. Where Jing is stored and slow burning, Qi is active and constant. It's the energy that's running right now, while you're breathing, while you're thinking, while you're sitting in a meeting trying to track 4 conversations at once. It doesn't sit in reserve, it flows, and the quality of that flow determines how you feel, how you think, and how much you can do before you hit a wall. When Qi moves freely, there's a particular quality to the day. Things feel available. You're not grinding to get started, not fighting yourself to focus, not spending enormous effort just to feel functional. That's not motivation or discipline. That's Qi moving the way it's supposed to. When it stagnates or leaks, the day has a different texture entirely. Foggy, slow to warm up, irritable at nothing specific. That feeling of effort without traction. Most people have normalized that second version so thoroughly they've forgotten the first one exists. The Taoist model makes a distinction that's worth sitting with. Stagnation and leakage are different problems. Stagnation is blocked flow. Leakage is flow going somewhere it shouldn't. Both produce that drained, low-grade, exhausted feeling, but they come from different sources. Chronic physical tension stagnates Qi. Shallow breathing stagnates it. Long stretches of sedentary, screen-anchored work stagnate it. Leakage looks different. It's the low-grade worry that runs in the background all day without ever resolving. The unfinished emotional conversations you keep half processing. The mental loops that don't produce decisions, just churn. Notice that none of those feel dramatic. Nobody wakes up and says, "Today I'm going to leak Qi for 8 hours straight." It happens invisibly in the gap between what you're doing and how you're doing it. The tension in your shoulders during a call you're not even stressed about. The held breath during emails. The anticipatory anxiety that runs quietly underneath everything. That friction is real. It costs real energy, and it accumulates. This is where the Qi-Jing connection becomes concrete. Because you generate Qi from Jing, burning Qi without replenishing it eventually starts pulling from the deeper reserve. One rough week of poor sleep and constant stress, your body handles it. Compress that into months or years, and the draw starts coming from somewhere it was never supposed to come from. Short-term depletion becomes structural damage. That's not a metaphor. That's the sequence the Taoists were describing. Here's the version of this that probably sounds familiar. You sleep a full night, 7 or 8 hours, nothing unusual disrupting it, and by noon you're already tired. Not sleepy, just flat. Jing is fine. The tank got refilled, but Qi has been bleeding out since you picked up your phone at 6:30 and spent 90 minutes in low-level reactive mode before you'd even eaten breakfast. The anxiety didn't feel acute. The scrolling didn't feel costly. But the flow was already disrupted before the day had any real demands on it, and now you're running the rest of the day from a deficit that sleep alone can't fix tonight. The Taoist principle that addresses this directly is Wu Wei, which translates roughly as effortless action or doing without forcing. Not doing less, that's a misread. Doing things without the internal resistance that bleeds energy through every task. the difference between someone who completes a hard thing cleanly and someone who completes the same hard thing while fighting themselves the whole way through. The output looks identical, the chi cost is not. Managing chi isn't about protecting your calendar. It's about the quality of presence you bring to what's already on it, and whether you're working with yourself or against yourself in the process. Shen, the signal running the whole system. Jing is the tank, Qi is the engine, but none of it matters if the signal running the whole system is corrupted. That's Shen. Shen is the hardest of the three to pin down because it's not physical in the same obvious way Jing is, and it's not something you can track the way you might track your energy output across a day. Taoists located Shen in the heart, which sounds poetic until you understand what they actually meant. Not emotion, not feeling, consciousness itself, the quality of your awareness, how clearly you're actually perceiving what's in front of you versus how much you're seeing through a layer of noise, assumption, and accumulated reaction. The simplest modern translation is signal quality. When Shen is strong, your mind receives information cleanly and responds to what's actually there. When it's degraded, you're working from a distorted feed and you don't know it, because from inside a distorted signal, everything still feels like reality. That's what makes Shen so difficult. Jing depletion has physical symptoms you eventually can't ignore. Qi disruption has a felt quality, the friction, the flatness, the midday wall. Shen degradation is subtler because your thinking continues. You're still producing thoughts, still making decisions, still functioning. But the calibration is off. You misread a situation and feel certain you read it correctly. You make a reactive call and feel like you reasoned it through. You lose perspective on something small and genuinely can't see that you have. The mechanism that would normally catch those errors is the same mechanism that's down. Chronic stress does this. So does information overload, which is worth sitting with for a second, because most people in high-performance contexts are processing a volume of input that would have been unrecognizable even 30 years ago. Unresolved emotional patterns do it too, the things you haven't processed that keep pulling processing power in the background. Sleep deprivation is one of the fastest ways to degrade Shen, which is part of why the Jing-Qi Shen sequence isn't arbitrary. Each layer genuinely feeds the one above it. Think about the manager who's objectively sharp, high IQ, experienced, good track record, but something's been off lately. They keep misreading the room in meetings. They make a call that feels decisive in the moment and regret it 2 days later when the full picture settles. Their team has gotten harder to read, or so they think. People around them have started filtering what they say before they say it, and the manager hasn't noticed. From the inside, this person is working hard, thinking carefully, doing their job. From the outside, the signal is clearly degraded. That's not an intelligence failure. Intelligence is still there. It's a Shen problem, a clarity problem, a perception problem that no amount of harder thinking will fix, because harder thinking with a distorted signal just produces more distortion faster. The instinct when you notice mental fogginess or poor judgment is to push through it, to think more carefully, to analyze harder, to apply more effort to the cognitive task. That approach works when the problem is a knowledge gap. It makes things worse when the problem is Shen, because the tool you're reaching for is exactly the tool that needs rest. You can't think your way back to clarity. Shen restores through stillness, through consistent sleep, through reducing the volume of incoming noise, and through giving your mind something quiet to return to instead of something else to process. That's not a productivity strategy. It's maintenance on the thing that makes every other strategy work. How the three treasures work as one system. 3 systems. But the reason this framework has lasted 2,000 years isn't that each piece is interesting on its own. It's that the relationship between them tells you something your optimization stack almost certainly doesn't. The sequence runs one direction. Jing feeds qi, qi feeds shen. That's not a metaphor about balance or harmony. It's a dependency chain, and dependency chains have a specific implication. A failure at the bottom doesn't stay at the bottom. It moves up, which means if your foundation is compromised, the layers above it are running on borrowed capacity, and they'll keep doing that invisibly until the borrowing stops working. This is why the most common optimization approach fails. Most people who feel mentally foggy or emotionally reactive go straight to the top of the chain. Mindset work, journaling, meditation apps, focus protocols, and those things aren't wrong, but they're aimed at shen while the jing underneath it is depleted and the chai running through the middle is leaking. You can do the practice perfectly and get almost nothing from it, not because the practice doesn't work, but because the substrate it's supposed to run on isn't there. You're trying to improve signal quality on hardware that's failing. The signal work doesn't stick because the foundation isn't holding it. Working backwards through the chain is the single most common reason intelligent people with good intentions and access to every tool stay stuck. They're not missing information. They're applying the right information to the wrong layer first. The amplification effect runs in the other direction, and this is worth understanding because it's not just additive. When Jing is solid, the qi it generates is cleaner and more stable. Clean qi means your mind isn't fighting background friction all day, so Shen gets a chance to actually clear. Clear Shen produces decisions that are better calibrated to reality, and those decisions over time tend to protect Jing. Less overcommitment, fewer choices that require days of recovery, better read on when to push and when to stop. The loop closes. It's not a checklist you complete once. It's a system that, when it's running properly, maintains itself. If you're somewhere in your 50s watching this, that amplification dynamic matters more now than it did 20 years ago. Jing declines naturally with age. That's not a crisis, it's a biological fact, and the Taoists knew it. What it means practically is that your margin for error has narrowed. The recovery debt you ran in your 30s without noticeable consequence now costs more to pay back. The same week of poor sleep that used to cost you 2 days now costs 4. The same sustained stress that used to flatten out after a weekend away now lingers. The sequence hasn't changed, but the tolerance for running it out of order has. So the framework matters more as you age, not less, because the feedback from ignoring it arrives faster and with less forgiveness. The system isn't asking you to live differently in every dimension at once. It's asking you to work in the right order. Foundation first, flow second, signal third. The practical blueprint, what to do first. So where do you actually start? The answer is almost always Jing, and not because it's the most appealing place to begin. It isn't. Rebuilding reserves is slow and unglamorous, and involves a lot of saying no to things you're used to saying yes to. But because everything above it depends on it, starting anywhere else is treating symptoms while the underlying problem keeps going. The audit question is simple. What is currently draining your reserves that isn't giving anything back? Not what's hard or demanding. Hard and demanding can be fine when recovery is built in. The real targets are the things running in the background with no recovery attached. The sleep you've been meaning to fix for 18 months. The chronic low-level stress you've stopped registering as stress. The commitments that made sense 2 years ago and now just eat time and energy without producing anything you actually care about. Start there. Qi management is a different kind of problem. It's not about what's on your schedule. It's about the quality of friction inside whatever is on your schedule. The meeting you attend while half-checking your phone. The work you do while something unresolved runs underneath it. The breathing that goes shallow the moment a notification arrives. You're not fixing that by doing less. You're fixing it by removing the internal resistance that's bleeding energy through tasks that don't need to cost what they're costing. Shen comes last because it restores through subtraction, and you can't subtract effectively until the foundation and the flow are at least partially stabilized. Less incoming information. Consistent sleep, not occasionally, but as a structural commitment. 10 minutes of quiet that isn't productive, isn't optimized, isn't aimed at anything. Your mind needs something to return to that isn't another input. That's not a luxury. That's maintenance on the thing that runs everything else. The question worth sitting with right now is simple. Which of the three feels most depleted? Because that's your entry point, regardless of which one feels most comfortable to address. Jing, Qi, and Shen aren't three separate problems you manage in parallel. They're one system running in sequence, and the sequence isn't negotiable. Every fix you've tried that didn't hold was probably aimed at the wrong layer, not because the fix was wrong, but because the layer beneath it wasn't ready to support it. This framework has been accurate for 2,000 years because it describes something real about how human energy actually works, not as philosophy, but as a practical map you can use to diagnose exactly where you're losing capacity and in what order to get it back. If something in this landed, drop a comment telling me which of the three you think is your weakest link right now. And subscribe if you want more breakdowns that take Taoist thinking out of the abstract and into something you can actually use.